Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing great. Today I want to discuss about OBS because recently I encountered a situation that was quite annoying to deal with, and even though the final fix was quite easy to do, getting to the point where I knew what I had to fix was quite a pain and I wasted like 3 days on it. But first let's talk about the standard settings for OBS image quality that I'm sure you've seen in many different tutorials. First, let's go to the video settings. In here you have the selection for your maximum recording FPS and the resolution that you desire, and if you want to scale the output differently. On the output tab you select advanced features, and let's start with the recording because I will talk a bit more about streaming later. First, you have the video recording format, for example MP4, MOV, MKV, and the application itself suggests you use MKV because if a crash occurs while you record, you can actually recover the footage with MKV. The problem with this is that MKV is not really supported by some video editors, but you can actually go into advanced and just tick this option right here to make it so the final file will be on MP4 even though you are recording as MKV. Up next we have the video encoder option, and we mainly have two choices basically: to encode using our CPU and encode using our GPU. For example, X264 is for CPU encoding, and those options right here are for GPU encoding. I have a AMD graphics card. Your choices might be different if you have Nvidia or Intel. CPU encoding can get you a better quality image, but it uses more resources, so it will probably get bottlenecked at some point depending on how high fidelity you want the image to be. And GPU encoding is overall really good, and it's better for performance. When it comes to GPU encoding, you have right here three options: AV1, H.264 and HEVC. AV1 and HEVC are a bit of a newer technology. The image quality and the resource usage is better, but that doesn't mean H.264 is not usable. In some cases it actually performs better, but you should try all of them and see whatever feature needs the best. In my case, AV1 was the choice that I made because it performed better overall than H.264. As for HEVC, I noticed something weird. For example, whenever I recorded, for some reason I had this green bar over here. I have absolutely no idea why, so I just decided to go with AV1. For the device, you can select your graphics card. For AV1 encoding, I only have this option, but if I switch, for example, to H.264, I can also select the integrated graphics from my CPU. The profile, you have a few options for H.264, but in my case for AV1 I only have main. And the most important thing now is rate control. You basically only care about CQP and CBR. CQP is focused on a constant image quality. This number right here, usually you will see in videos that people suggest either 20 or 18. The lower the number, the better the quality of the image, but also the bigger the file is going to be. When you select CQP, the bitrate of the recording will fluctuate. If the image is still, it will use a lower bitrate, but if there is a lot of motion in the image, it will use a higher bitrate. If you go for a constant bitrate, then no matter what it happens in the image, if it's still or not, it will use the same bitrate for the whole time. When it comes to recording, it's pretty straightforward. You are not limited by anything really. But if we go to streaming, things change a bit because you are transmitting live footage via Ethernet. To benchmark the image quality, I decided to use Need for Speed Heat because there are a lot of particles and movement in that game. Just as a reference, I recorded some gameplay with the highest possible settings so I can get basically a one-to-one image quality. When it comes to the video encoder, it's the same story. AV1 for me was the best choice after a lot of testing. The main thing that changes is the rate control. You have to use a constant bitrate that is within the streaming platform settings recommendations. For example, on YouTube, you can see here on this link right here that it tells pretty much whatever settings that you need to do in OBS for your use case, frames per second and resolution. If you select CQP as rate control, then you will have a lot of problems, mainly stutters, because the video stream will disconnect from the platform itself. This is exactly what happened to me when I first tried that setting, and that happened because CQP, since it focuses on a constant image quality, the bitrate will jump very high. At some point during the gameplay, it jumped to 200k. And that caused the stream to keep disconnecting. But that can also happen during static loading screens because the bitrate basically drops to 0 and the platform thinks that the stream disconnected. Now, as I said, I did a lot of testing with different encoders, bitrates, and I'm gonna show you how those settings performed for me. Now, it is important to note that the actual live footage from the stream will look better than the processed VOD. For example, this is a recording that I took while live streaming, right? And the same footage was recorded from the VOD after it was processed by YouTube. You can see that the actual live footage is a bit clearer. It doesn't suffer so much from pixelation. But to compare the different settings, I actually used the VOD because the VOD was basically the worst result possible. What I'm about to show you now, it's 1080p footage streamed at over 40,000 bitrate. I chose such a high bitrate to try and get as much image quality out as possible, but you will later see that it didn't really matter much. First, I tried the CPU encoder with two presets. The default one that OBS chose for me after the setup wizard, and that is very fast. You can see the image of the VOD is not really clear, there's a lot of pixelation, and the CPU usage is quite a bit high. The next footage also the CPU encoder, but this time instead of the very fast preset, it is the fast one. The lower you go, the higher the quality of the image, but also the higher the CPU usage. As you can see, the CPU usage is 80 to 90%, the temperature is hitting 70 something, and the image quality is not that much better. Up next is H.264. As you can see, it's honestly not much of a difference compared to the CPU encoder. The image is still pixelated, at some points the quality stabilizes, but it doesn't last very long. And lastly, AV1 encoding. Compared to H.264, the image is not as pixelated and high motion is overall handled better. But as I said before, all of this footage was streamed at over 40,000 bitrate. Now, what happens if I go to the recommended setting from YouTube to 12,000 bitrate? This is the video right here, AV1 encoding with 12,000 bitrate. There is not much of a difference, if at all, compared to AV1 with 40,000 bitrate, so it's pretty pointless to set the bitrate too high, because it won't really matter for the video quality and you are just wasting resources, especially because the streaming bitrate is capped by your internet upload speed. So from all this testing, I pretty much had to accept that no matter how hard I try, a game with such high motion like Need for Speed cannot be streamed with a one-to-one image quality. Next, let's talk about the issue I mentioned in the beginning. I present to you the following recording. The game is running at 60 FPS, OBS is recording at 60 FPS, with absolutely no dropped frames or spikes. Yet the video looks like it was recorded on 50 FPS. The reason for that is a timing mismatch when sending and capturing the frames. After spending some hours trying to figure out what was happening, I came to the conclusion that the main problem is my monitor refresh rate. The top refresh rate is 100 Hz, and along with the fact that apparently there are too many components that handle the frame pacing in their own way, causes uneven frame display. Because the system is set to display everything at 100 Hz, Mango HUD is limiting the frames at 60, GameScope handles frames in its own way, and OBS is trying to capture at 60 FPS, the frame timing becomes inconsistent. And this problem is only visible in the video recording. what I'm seeing while playing the game is absolutely completely fine. Now, to tackle this issue, there are two options. The first one is a partial fix, which requires reducing the number of components that interfere with frame pacing, in my case removing game scope from the launch options. This slightly improved the smoothness of the recording, but that comes with a trade-off because I lose features like forced full screen, upscaling any game, changing the mouse sensitivity, and forcing the cursor to remain within the window. The proper fix is to use a refresh rate that divides evenly into 60. In my case, that means switching from 100 Hz to 60 Hz. I do have the option to set the monitor to 120 Hz with the overclock option, but it is temporary and it turns itself off after 30 minutes. As you can see, with 120 Hz, the frame smoothness is restored regardless whether I use game scope or not. But since it only lasts 30 minutes, the only real solution I have is to set the monitor to 60 Hz. It is not ideal, and when I'm going to buy a new monitor I will make sure I can do at least 120 Hz, but right now this is the only option for me. The recording looks just as good as with 120 Hz. The downside is not being able to play games with higher than 60 FPS, since I won't be able to properly experience it even if the game can handle higher FPS, because the monitor is hard locked at 60 Hz. Now, of course, if you don't record videos often and don't stream, you can just turn down the refresh rate whenever you want to record and turn it back up afterwards. Ideally though, for a long-term solution, it is better just to have a display that can natively run at 120 Hz or higher. As I said, preferably something that divides evenly into 60, so 120, 180, 240 and so on. And that's about it. Those are the main issues that I encountered with OBS. It's something that I wouldn't have noticed if I didn't try to, one, start making YouTube videos, and two, try to record some gameplay footage. This problem that I had with frame pacing was really weird. I didn't even think something like that was possible or that it could occur, but either way, I hope this video helped and you won't have to spend hours like me trying to figure out what is wrong with the recording or with the stream. Thanks for watching.